Well, it's Monday, May 15th, and the WestJet Pilots have issued the 72-hour strike notice. Let's talk about what that means for you as a passenger and some of your rights today on Episode 5 of Just Plain Fun. Well, folks, I suppose it is official today. The WestJet Pilots have issued their 72-hour strike notice. Definitely a little bit of a surprise here as I was just looking through Twitter on my phone and reading through some news as people said the strike notice was issued. So I was sure to quickly go and look if that was the case. It was a news story published to the ALPA website as well. There's now a few news stations covering it as well. Mix 103.7 appeared on my page as the first one to cover it. But obviously a bit of a shock going on right now. The ALPA, as I mentioned, issued this strike notice here on Monday evening. It's currently just about 8:30 p.m. here in Alberta when I'm, reading this news. But the notice is actually therefore going to allow the union to begin job action as early as Thursday evening. So the update on their website had mentioned that at 3 a.m. Eastern time, so 1 p.m. Here in Mountain Time and midnight on the Pacific Coast, on May 19th, the WestJet Pilots will plan to begin the lawful job action of striking, and that's likely going to include grounding all aircraft and effectively shutting down all operations with WestJet. Definitely a little bit, I'm sure, of a chaotic next couple days we're going to see here in the Canadian aviation space. You're going to see, I think, a lot of airlines jacking up their prices to exorbitant rates. You're going to see a lot of chaos, I think, at the airports. WestJet, obviously, their customer service line, I'm sure, is already filled with a lot of people phoning in, wondering what's going on, wondering what's happening. And obviously, this is a fairly early development. And so as time progresses, we'll for sure have to do a episode later on maybe some further updates once we have it. But I wanted to get this episode out now, let people know kind of what is happening within the space at the moment. Kind of in the press release, they had mentioned that after the, last 9 months of negotiations, the WestJet management is still failing to understand today's labor market conditions. That's what Captain Bernard Lual, the chair of the WestJet ALPA Master Executive Council, had said. Obviously, we mentioned him a bit on the last podcast. You can check that out for a bit more information as well. But I think that's one really important piece and a factor I think I want to touch on here right before we get into maybe some of the implications after talking about some of your rights as a passenger is the statement from Captain Bernard Lual was also, without the economic and job security improvements our pilots require, WestJet will be parking planes as they will not have had enough pilots to operate them or accomplish its own growth strategy. So really interesting. At the time that I'm releasing this episode, Harvard Media News, which is where I'm getting some of this information, had reached out to WestJet for comment and will provide an update as soon as they become available. I will also, of course, be sure to link these articles in the podcast notes if you are interested to learn more. But now I think it's really important that we go over some air passenger rights. Obviously, there's a lot of people with the May long weekend coming up with travel booked with WestJet. I was one of the individuals with travel booked with them at the end of the month here, so we'll see how this applies to me. If it's going to apply to me, we'll find out. But, basically, if WestJet is going to cancel your flight, which now, of course, they're going to because of the pilot strike, your rights actually depend on your itinerary here in Canada. So WestJet always, though, must offer you a choice between the following two options, regardless of itinerary. The first one is continuing to travel. So that's a rebooking free of charge on the next available flight operated by any carrier, including on competitors with whom, WestJet actually has no mutual agreement. I know that I touched recently lately on how they have that partnership kind of with Delta, etc., Air France. And so in that case, that's one of the options that they have to do. And in addition, if the new departure is from an airport other than the one which you're located, they need to transport you to that other airport. So, maybe in the Ontario region, if you were supposed to fly out of Toronto, you're now going to fly out of Hamilton, for example, they'd have to provide that transportation for you. And option two that you can go with is just a refund and return to the point of origin. So you need they have to issue a refund in the original form of payment within 30 days of all unused flight segments or any segments that no longer serve any purpose. So there is likely going to be a bit of a waiting period there, but obviously one of the rights that you have as a airline passenger, I should say, is that you're going to get a refund if you so choose. And in addition is they must provide you transportation to your point of origin free of charge if you are not at that point of origin already. So myself, I was flying out of Calgary here at the end of the month. Because I haven't left Calgary airport yet, I'm not going to be eligible, obviously, for transportation back to that point because I haven't left. And so depending now kind of on your travel's origin and destination, they might have to, fork out some additional compensation, such as for your meals, your hotels, lost wages, what have you. But, one thing that I do want to recommend, and that the air passenger rights, board or committee, if you want to call it that, recommends, is record your own interactions with WestJet. Make sure you're keeping a log, whether that's recording a phone conversation, keeping it in writing with emails, etc. Whatever your preference is, you do want to have evidence. In that way, you can go either, if you have to, as an appeal, but that it just makes it so much more efficient for you, and is definitely maybe going to be required for you to take WestJet to small claims court to enforce your rights if it gets to that point, hoping obviously that it doesn't. But if it does, want to let you know that that's an option that you have. So just going to touch a little bit now on a bit of the intricacies, or not, I shouldn't say intricacies, but different itineraries that you can have. So if you're traveling entirely within Canada, so that would be obviously, somewhere between two destinations, unfortunately, your only protection is Canada's Air Passenger Protection Regulations, also known as the APPR. A lot of people in the aviation sector, though, for a long time have said it's severely malnourished, for lack of a better term, in terms of regulation. People, seem to take issue with when we compare, kind of to the European Union passenger rights compared to Canada. European Union, for sure, the airlines are required to pay out far more compensation in a circumstance like this. However, the current regulations we have in Canada, it actually considers a pilot strike to be an event outside of the carrier's control. So that means it's outside of WestJet's control. And therefore, all they really have to do is give you that option 1 or 2. Like I had mentioned earlier, there's not much else that can be done in terms of refunds, etc. Now, if you're going on an international trip, they are liable for damages incurred by you as a result of the delay. So that means, in addition to the option 1 or option 2 that I mentioned before, they also have to, after the fact, reimburse you for reasonable expenses incurred for meals, transportation, accommodation, lost wages, any other loss you may have occurred or that occurred because of the delay. Again, really want to emphasize here, keep a record of all of these things. Keep your receipts, make sure that you're keeping a log of everything that took place. If you are someone who is currently stranded internationally, or not stranded yet, but feeling that you might be, again, you really want to make sure you're doing that. The next thing that I will, kind of touch on here that I think is important is that they might attempt to deny compensation on the basis of some exceptions that exist within certain articles of the Montreal Convention, for example. However, there's a few reasons, why this wouldn't be the case. And the number one is that the strike wasn't announced, as an unforeseeable circumstance. It's been in talks, obviously, for the last while here, especially for at least for a month, right? We've been talking about this lately on the podcast. And so because of that, it was not an unforeseeable circumstance that the exemption applies to in some of those ways that WestJet could get out of it. So likely, we are probably going to see WestJet dig in its heels and refuse to pay. Unless passengers really fight back and have that evidence, and like I said, worst case scenario, have to take them to court. Again, we're hoping it doesn't get to that point, but it is for sure possible. And then, if you were departing from the European Union or the UK, again, on top of option 1 or 2, they also have to pay you a cash compensation in the amount of 600 euros. It becomes 300 euros, though, if you're delayed by less than 4 hours. And they do have to provide you with meals, accommodation, 2 free phone calls, etc. So, again, kind of been a crazy evening for sure in the aviation news world here. Those are just some of your rights. So like I said, again, really want to emphasize the major thing to be keeping a record of everything that goes on. That's going to be the biggest protection that you have as a passenger, making sure that your rights are met. And so, again, kind of a bit of a shocking, sad thing that the WestJet group could not come to an agreement with the pilots. I think that it's definitely going to be a major detriment, as I've offered my insight insight on this in previous episodes to the brand. There's going to be a lot of mistrust, and I think that it will take a long time to build that trust back if they ever do at all. So we're going to see what happens in the near future here. Just wanted to say thank you again for tuning in to the episode. If you do want to follow me, I am on Twitter. I'm at JustPlainFun380. You can find me there. Be sure to tweet me, DM me, whatever you got to do. Would love to chat with you a little bit more about this if you have any other questions. Really looking forward, though, to the next episode. Wishing everyone has a great rest of the week. We will talk to you very, very soon, though. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.